Yes, good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
And I'm very pleased to be here to interview Sue about her debut novel, 5 Ladies and a Bus Called Bertha. But I know you haven't written all your life, Sue, so when and why did you decide to write?
Well, it goes back quite a long time ago. And I was at college. I was a mature student in my 30s. And a great friend of mine, we had this idea for writing a novel between us. And it was going to be it was a historical novel based on a true fact, something that actually happened in the 12th century, but we moved it forward a few centuries, and it was basically a love story. Lots of heaving bosoms, well, some heaving bosoms, perhaps not too much. And we actually sat and we tried to write this book. And we've got the whole plot plotted out. We have got some of the characters' names. We know what's going to happen at the end, which is really, really important when you're writing, because you know where you're going. But I have to say, our styles of writing are very different, so that was a bit of a challenge. But like all big romantic novels, there has to be sex scenes. And every time we sat down, the pair of us, to write this, we just used to be convulsed in laughter and got absolutely nowhere. So to be fair, that novel will happen one day, but just don't hold your breath, because that's where I started from.
But what drives you to write?
I enjoy it. It's getting an idea, and I'm not a great ideas person. My husband, who's sitting there trying to look modest, he's the one with the imagination. I haven't got it. But if somebody just gives me an idea, and it can just be a tiny, tiny thing, and I run with it. But it's seeing, and sometimes I think, oh, I wrote that, that was okay, and sometimes I think, oh, that isn't as good as I would like it. But I think it's just enjoyment. And the other part of writing is there are writing communities. Now, Kate is a writer friend from my creative writing group. And fellow writers, on the whole, are incredibly helpful and supportive. So that's always an impetus to keep writing, because I think what they do, and I think, oh, I'm nothing like them, but it sort of spurs me on a bit.
Yes, we wrote a story between us, didn't we? It was a little bit like Consequences, where we we started off and we all wrote a page and followed it through. It was amazing, actually, how we managed to create a story that had a common theme through it, wasn't it? It worked well. So we do work well as a group, don't we? Working together.
Yes.
Yes. But where do you write on your own? Where do you sit? Do you have a little corner or a shed?
My own writing room in the back garden, if only. No, there's great excitement in my household. Last weekend, my youngest son finally moved out, because up until now I've either written on the dining room table, which is not desperately good, or we have a reasonable sized bedroom and I have a corner with a table and my laptop in the bedroom. But I'm actually getting my own study, and this is so exciting. I probably won't do any work at all. I'll just sit there thinking, oh, I'm a writer. But for the first time, I'll be able to write. Actually, where I started writing this was at Knaresborough Library before lockdown. And those of you who know Knaresborough Library, they've got an upstairs computer room with a desk. You can plonk your bum for as long as you need. And you look straight out over the square. And it was brilliant. I used to spend many a happy hour there with my book, because I'm very old-fashioned. I write in longhand before I type it up. But then I'd gaze out the square and an hour would go, and I'd actually hadn't written a word. But it was a lovely place to start writing. Now, with the pandemic, of course, everything closed down. And Wetherspoons in Knaresborough reopened before Knaresborough Library. So I then spent quite a lot of time, especially Sunday mornings, we'd go for breakfast, and sitting in there and just listening to people and looking round. There was something about that atmosphere that I actually found very freeing, and I could let my mind roam, and I'd come back with all sorts of scribbled pages that would eventually become the book.
And the ladies, were they in the square as well?
No, what started the book was that about 3 years ago, slightly over 3 years ago, I belong to an organisation called Sir Optimist International of Harrogate District, which is a very long title. And they have what they call a coffee club, which is retired members. Well, a lot of us are retired now these days, but they still have the coffee club because any excuse for a lunch or a coffee, you know, we're up for it. Anyhow, with the coffee club, I went to their summer lunch, and we had a very nice meal. It's in Boroughbridge, and after the meal we were chatting as you do over coffee, and one of the women said about losing your fingerprints as you get old. They wear away. Mine actually have already, and I'm still quite young. But how useful that would be if we were going to be criminals, because you can't leave your fingerprints. Now, DNA's actually blown that out of the water, but in the old days, of course, you always had fingerprints, didn't you? That was how you solved the crime. And I thought, well, this makes a fun short story. 5 ladies starting off as criminals, and they're not based exactly on those 5 ladies. I have to say, although quite a lot, if you have read the book, want to be Daphne. Daphne is 72, stunningly attractive and has always been, and absolutely man-mad, and that hasn't changed as she's got older. And I do know ladies like that. So people always want to be Daphne. But to go back to the original thing, it started the short story, and I thought, no, the ladies can do more than this. I mean, being criminals, it's just so common, you know. And my father was in a nursing home. He sadly died, and I thought, my ladies are not going to be so frail that they need nursing care, but some of them can be in a care home, which is the rung below a nursing home, if you like. And they're elderly, and they're stroppy, and they're forthright, very intelligent, because just because you get physically frail doesn't mean to say you're no longer the intelligent person you always have been. And that's how the story sort of came about. They're quite subversive as well. That's always good fun. Think, what would you expect the ladies to do? Well, we'll do the opposite.
Yes, indeed they do. Indeed they do. But how did you develop some of these characters? Because they are very different.
I think after a while, and this book has taken me a long time to write, much longer than I expected. I had some ideas. In fact, my husband and I found the original draft ideas. Most of the names have changed. Most of who they were have changed, because as I started writing the story, the characters developed themselves. Now, to give you an example of this, the youngest one, Grace, who is a mere 68, she's the widow of the late Henry Browning, vicar or past vicar of St Jude's Parish Church in Harrogate. And of those who know about St Jude, he was the patron saint of lost causes, so it sort of fitted. And Henry is a terror. Grace was a very devoted wife, and anything that was a bit iffy, oh, Henry wouldn't have approved of that. It's like the theme going through. Oh, Henry wouldn't have approved like that. And we had the idea that Henry actually was quite controlling and quite nasty. And then, as the story developed itself, actually Henry wasn't nasty and controlling. He was a very odd stick and very puritanical, and didn't anything fun he was definitely against. But he was a very devoted husband, and so that character, although he's a dead character, he has a part to play, and his character changed over the course of the book. So that's how the characters develop. That's great. Grace, I have to say, flowers from being a put-down vicar's wife to getting up to all sorts of things that sometimes she struggles with her conscience. Ooh, Henry might not approve of that. But there again, what harm is it doing? Daphne's quite a curious character. I do know ladies who are very attractive, love men, love sex, love everything else, have been married several times and just enjoy life. Well, that's easy enough, but you need more than that for a story. And what I did with Daphne, and sounds really weird, our ex-brother-in-law is a children's entertainer, well, retired children's entertainer. And we're only in very slight touch these days, but one of the things he does, and his fellow entertainers do, they always keep in touch with each other. They might have worked 30 years ago on a show or something. Or he worked in Butlins for many years as a children's entertainer, and they all keep in touch. And that mechanism is really, really helpful to the plot, because I can introduce lots and lots of Daphne's old chums. She either has her acting chums, because she's a singer and dancer, or she's got lots of exes, many of whom she's parted in good terms, not all, who she can prevail upon to do favours like cheap meals and goodies and nice things, provide nice things for the ladies. So that's how Daphne is a hopeless case from the beginning to the end, but she's a very jolly hopeless case, and actually the sort of woman you'd think, well, I could spend a good night out with her. Maybe her ending might not be my ending, but we'd have a good time to that point. Phyllis and Jane started off like a Greek chorus. You know, they sit at the back and go, whoa, whoa. You know, they are always enjoy themselves when things are going wrong. And you must have met people like that. You know, ooh. And they'd never gossip, but they do enjoy talking about people, it has to be said. But again, they developed quite a lot as time went on. It's trying to make the ladies real without them being caricatures. And that is quite a problem. So those were those two. Again, they've had relationships. One of the nice things about writing about older women, it's not like writing about a young girl who's innocent, never had a relationship, hasn't got a past. These ladies, like the rest of us, have pasts. They've been married, or they may not have been married, but they've had relationships. All sorts of things have happened to them, which makes them who they are. And that's great fun. The eldest character, Marjorie, who is a little bit caustic, very, very intelligent, as many older women are. She doesn't suffer fools gladly, but she's actually the older sister of Daphne and has all her life been rescuing Daphne from scrapes. So that's a constant. Again, Daphne getting into trouble. And for those who haven't read it, even at the end, Daphne manages to get herself, not in a bit of bother, because she enjoyed the experience, but you know, the rest of them are like, oh, Daphne. So that bit hasn't changed. But say, the characters, they developed in their friendships as well, because when you first meet them, the Harrogate Home for Distressed Gentlefolk. I love alliteration, and I thought that sounded the sort of place where three very independent ladies, for different reasons, have ended up. And they're quite formal with each other, apart from Daphne and Marjorie, because being sisters and being close sisters, that relationship's already there. But they're sort of a bit wary of each other, because they don't, even though three of them live in the home, and Grace comes to visit as the vicar's widow, she still comes to visit the residents in the home, that actually they're quite, oh yes, well, we could do this, you know, a bit hesitant. By the time they even get to the first trip out, they're bosom buddies. They're having a great time, they're up to mischief, life's a breeze. So that's how it develops, really.
And there's plenty of gin and tonic.
And champagne.
Which eases the relationships no end.
Yes. Well,
yes. And they do travel around a lot. So was there something particular about the places you chose for them to visit?
I have to say, all the places that they go to Scarborough. Well, I've worked in Scarborough. I know Scarborough really well. I love Scarborough. So that had to be the first one. They also visit Whitby. I love Whitby, I've worked in Whitby. And then they go to Scotland and Cornwall. And these are all places that I know very well. So that's why I chose because I could picture the places that I'm writing about. Now, when they go down to Cornwall, they're staying in a very posh farm barn conversion, very, very posh. Well, most people won't know the bit that I'm writing about. It's a little tiny bit between Looe and Plymouth. And you've got high cliffs and you've got beaches underneath. You've got like places, little villages like Downderry. But they're a bit off the tourist map. And we've put them there because they can go places. They can go to Plymouth, which is important because that's where actually I met my husband. And we were in the Navy together. So Plymouth is a very special place. But after nearly 50 years, it has changed a little bit. We have gone back. We've had some lovely holidays in the Highlands of Scotland. Now, you won't find the McAllis Glen or the McAllis Glen Hotel, but there are lots and lots of beautiful parts of Scotland with lochs and grand mouldering Victorian hotels that were once huge houses and now are sort of turned into hotels where the owners are desperately trying to make them solvent. So that's part imagination, part knowledge of the geography of where we are.
You're very good at dialogue in your book. Your dialogue reads really well.
Thank you.
Is that something that's practiced, or is that something that you learnt when you were a student, or does it come naturally?
I hesitate to say it comes naturally, but it's like, I think, what would the ladies say? And just write it down. Dialogue to me seems quite straightforward, but I know some people really, really struggle. And it's like listening to people. You just sort of sit there, you listen to the sort of things they say, not in a creepy way. I'm not trying to freak anybody out, but you just listen to what they say. And in my own mind, which is those who know me are getting quite worried about, these ladies now are quite real. And I can understand, I know what they're going to say. I know what they will say in character. And I have to say, apart from Grace, who's a bit soft, they're all incredibly forthright and sometimes downright rude, and I know that. So I can put that on the page. That comes quite easily. I'm not so sure if I'm that good with men, but
More practice.
More practice listening to men.
Listening to men. Yes.
Oh, that'd be novel.
Yes. You've written other things, though, besides about the ladies, haven't you?
I have. I've written a child protection textbook, which is totally separate, but obviously much more serious, just a short, very easy read textbook. And as part of the U3A writing group that I belong, we produced an anthology of stories and poems and things. And a couple of stories that I did do were spoofs of early 19th century novels. So I did a short story that was a spoof of Wuthering Heights. And then I did a second one, and I didn't call it Return to Pemberley because somebody had already naffled I think it was P.D. James actually, had already naffled the title, snaffled it, about what really happened. Never mind what the authors wrote in the 1800 or whatever. This is what really happened. And needless to say, it was quite comic, because that's what I enjoy writing. I enjoy writing comedy. It's fun. But I can be serious if I really have to.
But as writers, we all read as well. What do you enjoy reading?
Oh. My tastes have changed over the years. I mean, when I was a child, my mother used to say I'd read the toilet paper if it had anything printed on it. And that's absolutely true. I'd read anything and everything. And even probably well into my middle age. Now I'm much more discerning. I like whodunits, but not too cosy crime. If it's too cosy and too obvious, then I find it, no, don't like that. I like historical stories. I'm not into blood and guts and violence. I don't like that. It's the same with crime novels. I'm a great Agatha Christie fan. You had a nice body dead in the middle of the library, no mess, no fuss. I don't wish to know the mechanics or the mess. And then Miss Marple or Hercule Poirot goes out to solve it. That's my sort of whodunit. Yes. Sensible stuff. But I do read a lot of biographies. That is my other. I find other people's lives fascinating. I'm quite picky these days with what I read and how I read it. So, yeah, that's what I read.
So how about giving us a little taste then of what these ladies get up to?
I'll wait for time. Right. What I've done for this afternoon is I've chosen a small extract from the book where the ladies are up to their best behaviour, shall we put it. They're actually staying in this mouldering hotel in Scotland, having a very nice time. And they take themselves off one evening to a restaurant that has been recommended to them. And this is just a couple of pages from that. Remove my sticky bit so I can read it. The Wee Dram restaurant promised Scottish fine dining in an elegant setting by the side of the loch. The ladies sat down and perused the menu. Have whatever you want. Jane waved her hand expansively. There's plenty in the kitty. I'll have a prawn cocktail to start with, said Grace eagerly. That's not very exciting, said Daphne. Why don't you try something a bit different, like oysters? I like prawn cocktail. Grace was not going to be deterred. A good choice, madam, and Chef has his own version, which is very popular. The waiter smiled at her. Smoked salmon with a nice bottle of Chablis to start with, please, followed by the venison casserole. Marjorie looked round the restaurant. It was still early and few of the tables were occupied. And what would Madame like to go with her venison? A bottle of Gevrey Chambertin, perhaps? The waiter was very attentive. I don't know. Marjorie had seen how expensive it was on the wine list. What do you think, Jane? Oh, I'm sure that will be very nice. And she smirked. What have you been up to? Phyllis asked warily. Me? Absolutely nothing. I think I'll start with the scallops, and perhaps we need 2 bottles of Chablis. Make that Premier Cru. You've been gambling again, hissed Marjorie. Certainly not. I have given up playing poker, as I said I would. I have merely been making some modest investments on the alternative stock market, and they have paid up nicely. But before Marjorie could say any more, the wine arrived, followed by their starters of chunky slices of salmon, juicy golden scallops, and fat pink langoustines. The ladies set to with gusto when Grace suddenly let out a loud scream. A tiny, bright green caterpillar had emerged from the lettuce in her prawn cocktail and was carefully inching its way across her plate. The waiter rushed over to their table, followed by the maitre d'. Madam, what on earth is wrong? The waiter was very concerned. There's a caterpillar on my plate. Look there, wailed Grace. I might have eaten it. My apologies, madam. The maitre d' was all insincere charm and concern. This certainly shouldn't have happened, and I will take it back to the kitchen. May I offer you a bottle of house wine by way of apology? House wine? We're drinking Chablis Premier Cru, said Jane sharply. And Gevrey Chambertin with our main course, added Marjorie. Of course, madam. And suppressing a shudder as he saw his profits receding, the maitre d' sent the waiter to get fresh bottles. I hope you enjoy the rest of your meal. It was late when the ladies finally piled into a taxi to take them back to the hotel. It was, they agreed, a most enjoyable evening. You won't be surprised to hear, after all that lot, that the next day they weren't at their brightest. And that's one of their things. I have to say, and I'm looking at Sylvia sitting there because she's smiling at me, that actually happened. And it was Sylvia's daughter's hen weekend, wasn't it? And we were in London, and we went to the Oxo Tower, the restaurant in the Oxo Tower, which at that time was one of London's top restaurants. Beautiful table, sitting out, looking over the Thames with the lights twinkling. And one of our friends, exactly that happened. A little tiny caterpillar crept out of the lettuce. We were a bit slow, actually, because we were offered a bottle of house wine. And I remember I said, oh no, we're drinking Chablis Premier Cru. We didn't get the second bottle. But it was probably fair to say that even the free bottle was more than we needed.
She said it much more dramatically than that. She said, house wine? We're drinking Chablis Premier Cru.
I have to say, it was a great trip, because coming back, we were booked about five of us on the train coming back to Yorkshire. And the carriage, the air conditioning had broken down, and it was really hot. And we probably weren't at our brightest anyway. So I thought, can't sit in there. So I dragged the youngest of our group with me, and I found the guard, and I said, we're sitting in this carriage, and sort of gave her a nudge, stick your stomach out, because she was young enough to get away with it. Look, and my friends, you know, she's very delicate at the moment. She's going, oh. I can't remember how old her children were, but certainly beyond that age. And he looked at us and said, well, if you all sit there quietly and don't make a fuss, you can sit in first class. It was just that sort of weekend. It was great. But I haven't put that bit in. That might go in book 2.
Yes, well, book 2.
Book 2.
It's on the way. You've made a start.
I have got the plot from where it starts to where it ends. I know how it's going to end. And writing, I find, if I know where the book's going and how it's going to end, that's really, really helpful, because I can work to that. So I've got a huge plot line like this. I only need to write sort of 50,000 words in between, from there and there in the middle. But I know what's going to happen, and I know how it's going to happen. It's just working out. But sometimes you can do daft things. It's like Jed and I have started this exercise class for those of us who are not fit. Second week this morning. And I thought, my father was in a nursing home, which is different from a care home, but lots of the things like having a manager and having care staff is the same, you know, people to look after you. And I thought, wouldn't that be fun if I could introduce an exercise class for the ladies? And I'm sure they could cause havoc in some way. Even in this book, there's one poor care worker, and they're always giving her grief. And they're always in battle with the manager, who's got to balance the well-being of all the residents, making a profit, because let's be honest, most care homes these days are businesses, but also individually keeping them happy. And the three, Phyllis, Jane and Marjorie, they're polite, they're charming, they're dignified, but they're absolute terrors if they don't get their own way. So that's, and I'm sure there'll be more of that. But I thought an exercise class could be fun.
But the ladies are doing some good whilst they're doing all this, though, aren't they, Sue?
They are.
This is not going to send you on a Mediterranean cruise, is it? This is
Do you
going to
think-
help other people.
Do you think that the taxman would agree that if I went on a Mediterranean cruise, I could claim it back?
I don't know. You want to tell us about who they're helping?
Yeah, it is what I've done with the book, and we've had great fun writing it. Many very happy afternoons, evenings, coffees, sitting with friends and telling us all sorts of outrageous tales. So it did, although it's my work, it's my copyright and everything else, it felt very much like a joint venture. And so what I've decided to do is to donate all the profits to charity. Now, I do have some costs, like to get an ISBN number and getting the book format to actually so it looks beautiful like it is now. But anything else will go to charities. And the 4 charities I have decided, say, I am a member of Optimist International of Harrogate and District. And as an organisation, one of the things we do a lot of is fundraising. And drinking gin, I have to say. Do you know, I'd never had a gin and tonic till I became a Sir Optimist. So, and again, I'm looking at Sylvia because we were in Newcastle and we'd gone to the conference. Sir Optimist conferences tend to be terribly serious, but you have a lovely time, fueled, it has to be said, with lots of nice meals and alcohol. So what's not to like? We'd got up to Newcastle, and it was a big old hotel by the station. And first of all, the room they gave us, the loo was blocked. Well, that's no good, is it? So we went down. Oh, terribly sorry, we'll give you another one. And then they gave us a double bed. And I said, well, Sylvia and I are really good friends, but I don't think we're quite that good friends. So we ended up very nicely. You got the short straw because you got the double. I got a double room with big corners. Very nice. We had a very good party in there. But actually, we went to the bar afterwards and thought, oh, this is so frazzled. You know how you get frazzled. Have a gin and tonic. Life has never been the same since. So, but say, I am a member of Optimist International. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we're a bit like Rotary with attitude, if you like to think of us like that. Or, as I explained to some lovely school children, we're like Cubs and Brownies for grown-ups. We are a worldwide organisation, and we're very much about standing up for the rights of women and girls, often women and children. And I have decided, because to support 4 charities that the club support. So the first one is toilet twinning, because so many people across the world don't have access to any form of sanitation. It is literally going out in the bush and finding somewhere to squat. And that's bad enough for men, but gentlemen, you can at least stand and wee. It's absolutely awful for women who have to find somewhere where they can go to the toilet in the open. Lots and lots of problems, people being attacked by wild animals. These are often places like Africa, where there's snakes and all sorts of things. Girls being raped, because men know when they go out, particularly if at night they're only allowed to go out at night because that's what the culture dictates. So it really isn't great. Toilet twinning, which is part of Tier Fund, aims to provide toilets for families in the third world. Now, these aren't sort of your average flush and go sort of that we enjoy. They're often sort of huts with a hole in. Sometimes you get huts with 2 holes, sometimes you get a vent pipe, but that's the deluxe version. You know? And the way they do it is they have what I call toilet twinning. So you buy your toilet twin, it costs £60 to buy a toilet, and they send you a really nice picture and a picture frame with a toilet in a country, together with the coordinates of the village. So you can't actually say, this is the family that my money's provided a toilet for, but you can look through Google Maps about which village it is. The only exception to that is Afghanistan. Now, interestingly, when we started this project as Optimists, our first toilet we twinned was in Afghanistan, and this was before the fall of the Taliban, or before the fall of the government and the Taliban took over. So we actually have the coordinates where our loo is in Afghanistan, and it's right in the north, in a place so sort of poor and terrible that if you go online it says don't bother, go to the next village. It really is that bad. Now if you sponsor a toilet in Afghanistan, you don't get the coordinates. They're still working out there, but because of the problems with the government and the Taliban, you don't get to know exactly where your money has gone to. All the other places that they work in, you do. That's our first charity. Our second charity is much closer to home. It's Dementia Forward, which some of you may have heard of, which is a charity covering York and North Yorkshire, supporting people with dementia and their carers. Do a great deal of work, much appreciated, and I know a couple of people who use their services and say what a fantastic charity they are. Our third charity is food banks and the Trestle Trust. Now, as a club, we support food banks in Ripon, Harrogate, Wetherby, the Trestle Trust and Resurrected Bites, which is an organisation providing food at the end of their best before dates, but not necessarily. You can eat it, but it's not at its best. They also apparently have a wonderful cafe, which I keep meaning to go, where you go, you get a meal, and you pay for your coffee or whatever, what you can afford. And I understand, and I'm looking at Jan sitting quietly, if you can't afford anything, they'll still give you your coffee and buns.
Absolutely.
Wednesdays at...
Wednesdays, every Wednesday in Harrogate, and Tuesday and Friday in Knaresborough.
There you go, quick plug for them. Wonderful organisation. We as a club support that. Now for my book, because it's lots of different organisations, I have just supported the Trestle Trust, which is like the umbrella body for lots of the food banks, including the food bank in Harrogate and the one in Wetherby. So that's the third one. And the fourth charity is very much a Seroptimist charity, which is our benevolent fund. Because like everybody else, Seroptimists can fall on hard times, you know, sickness, disability, poverty, whatever. And that serves to support people. And it might be as simple as somebody living on a very tiny fixed pension or just their state pension and their boiler breaks down. And as you know, a boiler repair can cost a fortune, and the Benevolent Fund will help with that. It's that sort of charity. But there's always much more call on their funds than there is funds to support them. So that's my 4 charities.
Thank you, Sue. Are you happy to take questions from the audience?
Oh, yes, yes.
Do you have any? Would anybody like to ask Sue about her book or her writing or her charities?
Well, I've never seen this lot so quiet.
I know. What have you done to them?
I don't know. Best behaviour. Hey, Marla. Oh.
Hello.
Hello,
I'd
Marla.
just like you to explain, and I think lots of people might be interested to know this. As a writer, how do you write?
How do I physically write?
Apart from putting pen to paper.
I do.
Or going straight onto the computer. Do you have to have a special place? Do you have to, or can you write anywhere? How do you wait for inspiration? Do you make notes, or does it just come to you when you write down?
I wish I could say all of those. In terms of the actual writing process, I am not organised. I ought to be. And I keep thinking that one day I'm going to be a really good writer. I'm going to be a proper writer and sit down and work every day. But then somebody will say, shall we go for coffee? And I think, I might get new material. So I'm not organised at all. Now, I write everything in longhand before I put the laptop. When I'm putting it on the laptop, that is actually my first edit, if you like, because things do change, and I think all writers, their books change over as you fiddle around with characters and plot lines and where they're going. That does change. I'm a very disorganised writer. I will write down. I've always got a notebook because sometimes inspiration comes in the most unlikely place. I sent out a newsletter and I said, I have the plot for my second book. Hey! I knew it's got a working title. I knew what it was going to be, but we needed a plot. We need something to carry the story along. And I was cleaning the bathroom, as you do, scrubbing the loo, and I suddenly thought, that's it, I've got it. bothering went to pot, and I went down and wrote it. And that's how I write. I mean, occasionally I have to say, again, this is where the writing groups come are really helpful, because I can take chapters or bits of writing to my writing group and say, does this work? So that makes me sort of concentrate. Oh, well, we're meeting on next Tuesday, so I need to get this to people before next Tuesday. The other way I work is my poor husband sitting there, who's heard every word of the ladies and more and more. And I'll say to him, I'm a bit stuck. Well, there is an incident in there, which if you haven't read it, just close your ears. But one of them gets stuck in the ladies' loo. So, great stuff. Yeah, I can see that happening. So next thing you know, I'm in our living room, and we've got a long stool. It's got sort of short legs, long stool. Lay there, he says. Right, stick that bit of you under there, he said. Right, now wiggle, you're stuck. Yeah, I'm stuck, okay, what am I going to do next? Fortunately, it's just a stool, we can lift it off. So he made me crawl around the floor, so I understood not only how the character got stuck in the ladies' loo, but also how she was freed afterwards, because obviously that is important. So the answer is I am not a disciplined writer, but it gets there in the end.
Thank you.
Sandra?
Do you have a deadline date for your second book?
Well, rather rashly, I told myself, and I've started telling people, it'll only take me a year, so it'd be sort of this time next year. That's what I'm aiming for. I don't promise. Let's put it that way, because if I've got a date, I might be a bit quicker.
Over the years, we've been to the Crime Writers Festival.
We have, yes.
Many times. And we've sat, I remember one evening we sat through something where we had a writer for whom everything was plotted out definitively from the beginning. And there was someone else there who didn't plan anything. They just sat down and the characters wrote, and when they began their murder, they didn't know who the murderer was, and so on and so forth. Where do you fit on this spectrum?
I do some planning. I always start with this one, and the next one will be the same. I had the great idea I would plan each chapter, and I would put notes for each chapter. Unfortunately, that requires discipline. So if you look in my house, there is a folder with lots of headings, about 3 lines, and no further. So I'm not a great plotter. I roll with the characters, but I do try to plan some of it out. So it's to make sure it works. You won't be surprised to hear that, will you?
As a writer, though, I think sometimes you find that the characters that you create, they take over and they refuse to go where you want them to go.
There is definitely a touch of that with the ladies. One of the questions I sometimes get asked, especially in our club, well, I'm going to read this to find out which character is which member. Well, they're not. They are sort of amalgamated. They are characters in my imagination. But it's true what you say. I can hear them.
Yeah, fictitious characters that you create sometimes refuse to do the things that you think that you want them to do or you want them to do, and they go the other way.
Yes. Yeah. But anyway, we shall see how book 2 plans.
We look forward to book 2.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else got anything they'd like to ask Sue?
Just a comment on which books does she read. She very seldom reads the books for our book club.
We have to say that 1 or 2 of them have been particularly dire, and life is too short to read dire books. And that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it.
Yes, that's something that Jackie and I in another book group recognise. Life's too short. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I think
We're done.
we're done. Yes.
So thank you very much for coming. It's been lovely to see you all here.
Thanks everyone for coming, and we will be back again next month. If you want to join us.
The dynamic
It's on
duo.
It's on the 14th of October, where they'll be swapping roles.
We might even be swapping chairs, you never know.
Swapping chairs.
We might.
So, thanks again. We'll hopefully be there for next month.
Thank you. Right. Okay.
Yeah.